I tended the roses on the eastern lawn, while he paced the flagstone path with a phone in his hand and a storm in his eyes. He owned the hill, the house, the cars that flashed like coins in sunlight. He owned mornings split between meetings and workouts, and evenings measured by the glow of city lights rising like a tide. Yet every step he took sounded like a man walking on hollow wood. Wealth filled his rooms, but emptiness moved through them like a draft he could not find and could not seal. He surrounded himself with clocks, one in the gym, another in the study that hummed like a soft insect, a thin gold one on his wrist that caught the sun and threw it in small, careless sparks. He raced those clocks with immaculate routines, swallowing vitamins, signing papers, shaving minutes the way a sculptor chips marble. Still, the minutes bled through his fingers. I saw it in the way his coffee grew cold beside him, untouched while he checked numbers that changed too fast to mean anything lasting. He insisted the grounds stay evergreen, fast-growing trees, instant hedges, flowers that looked mature the day they were planted. He wanted summer in April, shade in a week, the satisfaction of a result without the ache of waiting. The soil obeyed, but it never loved him for it. Plants can be coaxed, not commanded, and time is the slow language they speak. I listened to that language every day. He did not. There were rooms no one entered. A long dining table with 12 chairs, polished to a shine that reflected a ceiling no voice had softened in months. A piano with its lid closed, dust gathering along the hinge like grey snow. Photographs leaned along a hallway, faces paused mid-laugh, turned slightly away from the present, as if the past were easier to meet than the day at hand. He walked by them quickly. Speed was his shield, movement his disguise. Still, the cold of winter sat in him even under July's sun. He feared birthdays, not because of candles, but because the cake was a clock in disguise. I noticed the way his breeze of a smile faltered when the calendar rolled forward, how he deferred parties and replaced them with dinners that tasted of efficiency. He reached for new goals the way a swimmer reaches for the wall, desperate for the turn, certain the next lap will feel different. It never did. He could purchase anything, but not a single breath more than the hour would give. That knowledge lived in him like a small stone in a shoe, barely visible, impossible to ignore. And as I culled the spent blooms at his feet, I understood that the man who owned everything had yet to learn the slow mercy of time. The news came on a morning when the air was heavy with dew and the roses bent under their own weight. His closest friend, a man who had walked beside him through every business venture, was gone without warning. No farewell, no negotiation, just silence where once there had been a voice. He stood by the fountain with the phone pressed to his ear, as if listening harder would bring the man back. But death does not return calls. For the first time, I saw him sit without purpose. The phone slipped from his hand into the grass, and his gaze drifted beyond the walls of his estate, as though searching for the place where time had carried his friend. It was then that he spoke to me, not with command, but with the tremor of a boy lost in a marketplace. He asked how it was possible that all the wealth in his possession had no power against the quiet hand of time. I said nothing at first. Some truths must land gently, like leaves finding their place on the ground. In the days that followed, he wandered the gardens more often, slower now, as if hoping the paths themselves might answer him. I began to tell him small things, lessons too simple to be noticed in his world of contracts and numbers. I spoke of seeds that require patience, of trees that bear fruit only when one has endured the waiting, of roses that must be cut back to bloom again. He frowned at first, unaccustomed to parables that did not resolve with profit, but slowly he listened. He admitted to me, one evening as the sky bruised purple, that he had not seen his son in nearly a year. Business had always claimed a space where family might have lived. His eyes, usually sharp and restless, softened then. He confessed he feared he would meet the same fate as his friends said in absence. I told him time was a garden of its own, and that if neglected, weeds of regret would take root faster than he imagined. He looked at me for a long while, as though the weight of those words pressed on him harder than any boardroom decision. The next morning, he rose before the sun and sat on a bench to watch its slow climb. It was a small act, but his first surrender to a moment that asked nothing of him except presence. The clocks still ticked, but for once, he let them be. The change did not arrive in a rush. It was a slow turning, like the seasons shifting from cold to warmth, barely noticed until one day the air smelled of spring. He began to walk the garden with his hands free, no phone clutched tight, no hurried steps. He would pause beside the roses, tracing their petals, as though they held answers he had overlooked his entire life. I saw him begin to breathe differently, not like a man racing the clock, but like one finally allowing air to fill the spaces he once ignored. One afternoon, I watched him dial a number he had avoided for months. His son's voice answered, cautious at first, then warmer as their conversation stretched longer than either had planned. Days later, the boy came to visit. Their embrace was hesitant, but real, like two rivers finding each other after years apart. The mansion, once a museum of silence, filled with the sound of laughter, footsteps echoing down halls that had long ached for company. The piano was opened again. A melody stumbled at first, then found its way, spilling into the rooms with the gentle insistence of life returning. He asked me, more than once, why I had stayed all these years tending a garden that grew and withered in cycles, never permanent, always fleeting. I told him it was precisely because it never lasted that it mattered. Each bloom, each season, each hour carried weight, only because it could not be repeated. He nodded, and in that quiet agreement, I saw him finally understand. When autumn came, he no longer resisted it. He welcomed the falling leaves as reminders, not losses. He set aside meetings to watch the sunrise, invited neighbors to share long meals at the table that had sat empty for too long, and learned to linger without guilt. Time, once his enemy, became his teacher. He no longer measured it in profit, but in presence. The man who once owned everything had learned that true wealth could not be stored in vaults or accounts. It lived in the laughter of family, the warmth of friendship, the stillness of mornings, the tenderness of moments that cost nothing and yet meant everything. His fortune remained, but now it served him, not the other way around. He had discovered the value of time, and in that discovery, he finally found peace. If this story touched you, take a moment to reflect on your own journey. And if you found meaning here, consider liking, sharing, and commenting with your thoughts. Don't forget to subscribe to the tales we share for more stories that move the heart and stir reflection.